Thanks, Minister Cook, Commissioner York. Good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for coming along for today's weather briefing. The purpose of the briefing will be just to update you on overnight conditions, have a look at what the forecast is, and just update on all the flood circumstances around the state. As of today, we have showers and thunderstorms across the east and the south, more frequent about the southern ranges and western slopes, and some possible severe rain happening in those areas. Daytime temperatures are near average in the northeast and northwesterly winds, and that's freshening around the south coast. We do have a hazarded surf condition around the Hunter to Eden coastline. We do have had some isolated heavy showers around Singleton in the Hunter region this morning on the radar, and as this complex low system moves further south, we'll start to see the weather move into Victoria and Tasmania into Wednesday. Partly cloudy for the rest of the week, with showers possible in the south and in the east on Wednesday, in the northeast on Thursday, and then back to the southeast on Friday before clearing over the weekend. The rain since 9 o'clock yesterday morning, so to about 7 o'clock this morning, most of the rain has fallen in the south coast of New South Wales. Volumes of around 50 to 100 millimetres were common. Mount Durrag about 142 millimetres, and Maroo are at 106 were the peaks. We did have some falls later yesterday around the Pacific Palms mid-north coast area of New South Wales, with Pacific Palms at Wallace Lake receiving 55 millimetres. Sydney yesterday was between 10 and 30 millimetres, with a larger downpour at Mona Vale Golf Club. The impacts for today are largely around the thunderstorm risk. Whilst we do have some rain still on the south coast and it's moving southeast, thunderstorms are still pose a risk for much of the state. We don't have a thunderstorm warning out at the moment, but they can be issued at any time depending on how the conditions are forming. Other weather warnings are a severe wind, marine wind warning for Bateman's Bay and Eden, and of course that hazardous surf warning for the Hunter to Eden coast, with swells around 3 metres with a period of around 11 seconds. To the floods, we currently have 28 flood warnings in place, and 9 of those are of major concern, and I'll touch base on some of those in a moment. In the good news, 3 of those warnings are final warnings, and they are final warnings for the Brunswick, the Macleay and the Castlereagh. With the Castlereagh, however, we may see a flood warning reissued with renewed peaks possible to minor, but we'll be reviewing the data this morning to see if that's the case. We also have an initial flood warning for Maroo Creek around Hay for minor flooding today. Staying with the coast, or going to the coast with the Wilsons River around Lismore, just an update on that particular area. We did actually have moderate flooding in the Wilsons River, and that peaked last night about 10 p.m. at 6.8 metres. It's now falling. Further downstream into the Richmond River at Bunga and Coraki, they did experience some minor flooding. That is peaking today. Moving into the west of the state for inland catchments, and I'll move through and pick out some of the key towns in each of these catchments. In the Murray, with the continuing story of Moama and Echuca, we currently have a steady major flood at 94.9 metres above sea level, and it is steady, and we'll just keep watching that as it slowly decides to fall. For the Darling and the Barwon, again, Burke and downstream, they are still rising to major levels around Friday this week. For the Lachlan, the focus is really around Forbes. It was upgraded to moderate flooding last night. It's now expecting to reach 10.4 metres on Wednesday. Major flood levels are at 10.5 metres, so it's at the higher end of moderate flooding. For the Macquarie in Warren, we still have a major flood in that particular area. Possible renewed rises. It looks like it will be peaking around 9.7 metres on Wednesday. Again, those peaks are very slow to recede. For the Murrumbidgee, Hay is forecast to be exceeded today, reaching about 8.4 metres on Friday. And in the Bogan, the similar story for Mulga Warriner and Gongolgan is that majors are continuing with rises possible, subject to rain. In the Namoi, the focus is really on Narrabri. It may reach 7.4 metres. Actually, the Narrabri is looking like it may peak today at about 7.6 metres. That's just come in now. Just for the record for Narrabri is 9.4 metres in 1955, so it's some way off the record. For the Guida and the Mihai Moree, which has been dealing with a major flood for a few days now, it may fall below major today, but again it's a slow recession in those particular areas. For the Hawkesbury, we have a flood watch for areas for the Hunter down to the Hawkesbury, and it may see minor flooding, but we'll keep an eye on that. It's just a flood watch at this stage. Same for the Hunter around Bulga and Singleton, a flood watch for minor, but we have issued a flood warning for the lower Hunter and Maitland for minor flooding, and we may see that today. The forecast conditions are for the south coast. It's really focused on the Bega area today and the Dewar, and for the inland areas we're still looking at a long-term slow recession of major flooding and watching any incoming rain patterns to see if that has impacts on those particular catchments and towns. As always, we remind everybody to stay focused on their weather risk and to look at the Bureau's website for fine details, particularly the METI function, and also to use your phones for the Bureau's weather app. Trigger your notification process so that you actually get beeps on your phone whenever there's a change in our warnings for your particular town. To summarise that, we've got rain easing across the state as the low pressure system moves further south over to Victoria's Mallacoota area and then down into Bass Strait into Tasmania. Whilst that is the case, we still have showers likely across much of the state. Severe thunderstorms are possible, and with those severe storms it brings the likelihood of heavy rains, intense rains in small areas which can lead to flash flooding, and as the Minister mentioned, we have really sodden soils, so when you have those intense rainfalls on sodden soils, the potential for landslips becomes heightened. I encourage everyone to keep an eye on all of their weather risks and to stay in touch with the SES's Facebook page for any actions required. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So it's been another busy 24 hours with these significant weather events moving through New South Wales, coming from the western part as well as on the east coast of New South Wales. The New South Wales SES has had out over 1,000 volunteers out in the field helping our communities. And so not only are we looking at those western plains, southwest slopes, down into the Riverina, the coast, but now our priority is including the south coast of New South Wales down around the Bega area. So there's been a number of flood rescues overnight, 32 with 664 requests for assistance. We have had a flood fatality in this event, and so it is disappointing that the SES and our partner agencies are continually asked to go out and rescue people who are making a poor decision to drive through floodwaters. So I remind all the community to please be aware of your risk. We've heard that the weather at the moment is receding a bit and the rivers are slowly receding, but it doesn't take away the risk of the communities and the roads, the water across the roads, across a vast area of our state. So the risk hasn't gone for those people travelling around the state. It might be sunny weather out there, but the waters in various areas, as discussed by the BOM, are still rising, and there is a lot of water across the road, across many roads, particularly the secondary roads, that are cut and create a danger to motorists. So again, I would ask people to be aware of their risk and not drive through floodwaters. We've also been out helping communities, particularly now starting on the south coast, putting out warnings and asking people to prepare their properties for the rain that may come, particularly tying down loose items, cleaning out your gutters. I want to make sure that our volunteer agency and our partner agencies are available for life-saving requests and to help the community where most needed. And often we're taken away by helping homes repair their roof damage and stop inundation of water, where there could be some preparation steps to take before the rains come, which obviously helps your property as well as releases our volunteers to do other work around the community. So there are still a number of evacuation centres open. There's 7. We have closed some. So there's always somewhere to go if people have that risk and are asked to evacuate in their communities. So that's really important. The flash flooding, we've heard from these thunderstorms, is still a major risk for us. The ground is saturated, the dams are full, and obviously the rivers in various locations may still be rising. So important to listen to all our messages and follow our advice when we give that advice out to the community, particularly where we ask you to evacuate. Once we ask you to evacuate, that is because we have assessed the risk based on the Bombs Bureau's forecast in relation to your property and your safety. So please, when we say evacuate now, leave the premises. In some locations there is some good news. We will be starting to do some rapid damage assessments. It's important that you wait until the emergency services and particularly SES go in and assess the risk of those homes or businesses that have been damaged and put out a call to you that it is safe to return with caution. So it can be dangerous after the waters have flowed through premises, and we want to make sure that no one is placed at risk by going back in there. So as I said, we've been extremely busy, not only in preparation, door knocking, working with the ADF. We've been helping the New South Wales Ambulance in relation to patients who need medical care, whether it's getting at the ambulance officers across the border or bringing patients out to safety to get that medical care. We've had the ADF helping us door knock, and particularly in some of these western communities of New South Wales where they're cut off and isolated, we're very busy now with the resupply and making sure that they can get access to food and medicines to make sure that they remain safe as well. So listen to our warnings. If you need assistance from the New South Wales SES, ring 132 500, and if it is life-threatening, ring 000. Our website has lots of information there. We have the new Hazard Watch system there so that it gives clear information about what our warnings mean and what you need to do as a result of those. So thank you. Open it up for questions now.
What's the outlook for the South Coast over the next 24 hours with all that heavy rain? What can you expect there?
The outlook is for that heavy rain to continue a bit today, and then it's, as the low moves south, we'll expect it to ease. So we're still looking at rainfalls of around 100 millimetres. The beauty of the South Coast is that it has a potential to get away quicker than the inland areas.
Is there flooding there at the moment?
There is some minor flooding around the Dewar River, and we're watching the Bega River as well.
Yep. Maybe one for Commissioner York, just in regards to those damage assessments, and you mentioned that there is a risk with people returning to their home. What in a practical sense, what risk is there when people go back to a home? Yeah,
so certainly the water is contaminated, particularly in rural areas, and a number of towns have had issues with their sewer system. Fresh water may not be available to the homes, and so that water going through the homes or businesses presents a danger in itself, as well as the electricity to those premises. Water and electricity obviously don't mix and make a heightened risk for those members. And it's really important for us not only to make sure that those premises are safe, but it gives us a lot of intelligence about where the water's been so that we can make sure that we plan for future floods and we know the effects of what happens when the rivers reach a certain height and the areas that get inundated as well. So we've got lots of crews, not only SES but our partner agencies, on standby at the moment, ready to be tasked to go out and do those rapid damage assessments.
Commissioner, with those flood rescues, 32 is very high, and in the past it's been much lower than that, only a handful. There was a point where there was 0 flood rescues in one day. Why do you think this is, and are you concerned about this?
Well, I'm very concerned about the flood rescues. People are making poor decisions, but also I acknowledge that sometimes at night, if you're travelling on a country road and you're travelling at 100 kilometres an hour, now it's difficult to see the water across the road, so you find yourself placed into danger by driving into the water and your engine cutting out and you being stuck in a high risk of being washed away across the road. 32, 1 is way too high. 32 is well above what we want to see in the community calling for assistance. But it's also represents the broad area of the flooding across New South Wales and the many, many roads that are affected across our transport system as well. So, I urge people to be more cautious when they're travelling around, not do it in some of these high-risk areas unless it's essential.
And with Moama, that did peak, and Minister mentioned that will stay like that for a while. Do we know how long that is?
It's expected to stay a few days because it's flowing away quite slowly. And of course the water that's falling in other areas is on the ground and travelling into those river systems, and again keeping it up at those high levels, and particularly around some of the more regional locations north of the riverina. It's very flat out there and there's a lot of water covering those plains.
This might be impossible, Minister, at this early stage, but is there any broad estimation yet about a dollar figure of how much this particular emergency may cost?
A little bit too early to put those estimates on it. We do know that there will be significant cost in respect of the agriculture sector in particular. Those vast agricultural areas right through the central west, the riverina, up through that northwest, whether it's cotton, wheat, canola, even dairy. There isn't an industry in the ag sector that's not impacted by flooding at the present, or hasn't been exposed to it repeatedly this year.
In some ways, does that make it more difficult compared to, say, Lismore earlier this year to actually work with the insurance companies and then put an estimation on the damage and the cost?
What it means is that we need to continually work with landowners, the Department of Primary Industries and Local Land Services, continue to work with farmers to get their information in with respect to what that damage looks like. We continue to work closely with the federal government to make sure that we are in a position to support farmers should they be needing that extra support through this time. I mean, there's no doubt that our primary industries have experienced just one disaster after another. 4 years ago we were in the grips of the worst drought in 100 years, and I've had the opportunity to view footage from that time, and then new footage of what it's like with crops coming up and that sense of optimism, and now in recent days see exactly the same paddock completely underwater, and that devastation that farming families feel when their livelihoods are literally washed away at this time. So we're very cognizant of the impact on farmers. We will need to continue assessing that damage over the weeks ahead as those floodwaters recede, and we will continue to stand by farmers through this time.
I know this was touched on by the state and federal governments last week, but is it inevitable this will have an impact on food prices in the cities?
I think it's fair to say that there's a very strong possibility that it will flow through to food prices on the supermarket shelf when you've got not just the actual harvest being impacted, but our ability to transport it and get it from the farm gate right through processing and onto the supermarket shelf, that those impacts are likely to be felt at one point or another. But a little bit too early to tell yet. We really need to understand exactly what the extent of the damage is, and we will be in a better position to know around our next steps as the days and weeks unfold.
There has been calls from farmers to have more support from the federal government, especially with today's budget, for funding for farmers who have lost their crops. Is that something you would support, and is New South Wales doing anything statewide to support farmers?
Well, look, we continue to work closely with the federal government through the disaster funding arrangements. Of course, we would welcome any additional support through the federal government process in relation to disaster impacted communities right across New South Wales, including the farming sector. But we will continue to work closely with the federal government to make sure that we do offer that support where it is needed.
Commissioner, can I ask you a question about how stretched you are at the moment? We've got as the Minister says, it's from corner to corner in the state at the moment. In the history of the SES, have you seen such a wide area of the state impacted by a disaster like this, such as major flooding? And can you talk about the challenges of how tough that may be over such a large area?
Yeah, it's very tough for the New South Wales SES. In the last financial year, that was the busiest year in regards to requests for assistance that we'd had of any year for the New South Wales SES. And obviously the floods have continued, and they are quite significant what we're facing at the moment. The volunteers are just fantastic. Like I said, we've had 1,000 of them out yesterday and averaging probably over 500 every day, supported by our other emergency service personnel. They are tired. We are making sure that we're looking after their health and wellbeing. We've got support services going around, just making sure that they're fit and healthy to do what's needed to respond to the community's requests. Trying to give them some days of rest days, bringing in other crews from other states, and adding those additional resources really helps our volunteers. I had the opportunity of going to the Willoughby Lane Cove unit last night. They had an event on. Obviously some of the volunteers are out there helping the community, but they're very positive and very able and very capable and willing to go and help the community. So obviously we can always do with more volunteers. If anyone wants to come and volunteer for the New South Wales SES, we would be really encouraged for them to come forward. But yeah, it's a very busy time for the SES volunteers, but we see the vision of them going out in the flood boats, helping the community, door knocking, taking out supplies. So there's lots of jobs for them to do, and the feedback from the community is they very much appreciate the New South Wales SES and our partner agencies to help them.
Would it be the biggest though that the SES has ever conducted?
I haven't analysed the figures, but I would have to say I would think it would be the biggest that we've had to do for ongoing flooding, and the third La Nina event. The saturation of the lands and the effects that this water has, filling up those river systems and going into areas again like we saw in the February-March floods, areas that really haven't been flooded before are now being affected. So the footprint of what we're facing is much larger because of the weather events that are just rolling in one after the other, and as the Bureau said today, looking at another one coming through on Sunday. So they're forecasting busy times through to at least December, and as we get closer they'll be reassessing their forecasts of the weather.
Are you getting much pushback from employers, and it's not a criticism of them, but given the length of time this has all been going on, employers having difficulty allowing their SES members to leave work for extended periods?
Yeah, it's been pretty good. Like a lot of our members are not only employed, they're self-employed. Obviously we've heard about the farming lands and the crops being damaged. Many of our members are farmers out there, competing with the weather for their livelihood, as well as putting on their oranges and going out and helping the community. So I take every opportunity, and I know the Minister has as well, in thanking our employers to let them go and do what the community needs. And particularly, the employers know, we talked about food, they sell food, they're running supermarkets, whatever job that they do, it's really important that we allow our volunteers to have that time to go out and help the community. So I thank them, but it is a big strain on both our volunteers and the businesses that employ them or their own businesses. Okay, thank you very much.